So Macron's special deal for the UK post-Brexit on immigration, is it really a good deal or is it just more BS and bluff before next year's showdown in March? Hi everyone, this is Nick Knightsbridge. It is January 21st, 2018, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about this BBC article regarding President Macron of France's special deal for the UK. Now, it comes on the heels of a treaty that just concluded this week. It was a first state visit by the new president to the UK. And of course, as everyone knows, March 2019, the UK is set to leave the European Union. So there's a lot at stake. Now, this particular treaty was more about how migration is going to be managed after Brexit, essentially. The French have been complaining that since 2003, we've had an agreement between the UK and France named Le Touquet, and it was basically borders between the two countries were extended into the other. So that's why you have British immigration in France, in Calais, and you have French immigration in Dover. Of course, any other ports also. It's not just these ports. But essentially what happened is that the UK's borders were extended to mainland Europe, which the French have learned is particularly problematic because immigration is all kind of trying to go to the UK. Migrants are trying to move to the UK. So really, it's a one-way issue, a one-way problem for the French because they have thousands of people essentially camped out in different places along the French maritime border, along the coast of France, trying to get into British-bound trucks, lorries, as I would say. So yeah, that's essentially the problem at hand. Now, in the fall of 2016, there was a big camp referred to as the Jungle. That was closed, and the French tried to move all these would-be migrants, so to speak, to different areas of France, so they didn't accumulate and essentially set up another camp. Now, there used to be a lot more sympathy towards these people, but since immigration in Europe generally has become a hot topic issue, especially in the wake of the Syrian crisis, that patience has kind of run out, and people have been much less tolerant and accepting to fleeing people in general in Europe. So essentially, they were getting tired of these camps. They were disbanded. Now, I've heard recently that some makeshift camps were set up again, but pretty much it's a cat and mouse game between the police and the would-be migrants. Now, the new agreement isn't really replacing Touquet. It is a complement, as the BBC puts it, a complement to the Touquet agreement. And essentially, the Brits are going to be spending £44.5 million on security at Calais. Now, some right-wing politicians in the UK, namely the leader of... what was his name? Nigel Farage? No. I forgot his name. Okay, anyway, the former leader of the UK Independence Party, he kind of essentially said that Theresa May, the Prime Minister, has capitulated, so essentially sold out by writing the check, because the French aren't going to be spending any more money on this. But of course, the French and Macron were arguing that the French have really borne the brunt of all the problems, so they've had to pay numerous amounts of money for this already. So anyway, £44.5 million, and also, but Macron has insisted that they're going to be speeding up applications, so people aren't going to just be wandering around waiting to get into the UK if they can. Applications are going to be, for adults, going to go down to 1 month for asylum, and from 6 months, and accompanied minors are going to go down to 25 days. Now, didn't mention how many days they were before, but probably almost as long as the adults. So that's a big help, of course, because when the decisions are made, whether they're determined to be genuine refugees or just economic migrants, it's better for everyone that they're not just wandering around, namely for themselves as well. Now, I wanted to touch on the children in this, because it's important to note that a lot of people, a lot of basically migrants have found out that it's a lot easier. There are certain protections afforded under law to migrants if they are unaccompanied minors. Obviously to protect the interests of the child, there's a lot more leeway. They don't typically hold them for too long. They try and find suitable homes, accommodation, see if there's any relatives in the host country. So basically a lot of children, unaccompanied children, have been gathering in northern France hoping to get to the UK. Now, some of them have relatives in the UK, some don't. But there has been a lot of contention also from, again, more conservative politicians and media sources that a lot of these supposed kids are not kids. And to be honest, when I look at some of them, they look like well into their 20s. Some of them even touching on 30, I would say. So because there's a little bit of disagreement about how to genuinely test, and there's really no clearly defined way to ascertain the age of someone. You can pretty much ballpark guess it, but because of the sensitive nature of this, they generally, a lot of people have come into the UK acting as if they were children, but they weren't. But anyway, so that was a really hot topic issue about, let's say, last year. 2016, where the UK took quite a few, and there was a lot of criticism for the Prime Minister at the time. I'm pretty sure it was Theresa May. It might have been a few on the heel of David Cameron's prime ministership. But anyway, so that's the 2K. Now let's have a look. Let's see. Okay, so another important factor to remember is that, Macron has been trying to play the European statesman, I would say, since he's been elected to office. He kind of, one of the youngest presidents of France has ever had, and he likes to think of himself as a statesman, kind of a pro-European statesman, of course. And so since a few months ago, Germany's been unable to form a coalition government. So the Chancellor Angela Merkel has been trying to do so. However, Germany at current time stands without technically a government, and Germany being the powerhouse of Germany, Germany being the powerhouse of Europe, it's kind of like the de facto leader. The Chancellor of Germany is the de facto leader of the European Union, so to speak. But since Mrs. Merkel is kind of busy dealing with domestic politics and the rise of kind of right-wing parties that have won quite a few seats in their parliament. Since she's busy, Mr. Macron's kind of taking the opportunity to kind of be the flag bearer of the European Union. So he's kind of with this article, he's kind of sounds like he's promising the UK a special deal, but I'm not so sure how special it is, because basically he says that if the UK doesn't want to abide by the rules, all the rules set out with respect to freedom of trade, freedom of movement, then it can't basically have its cherry. So Macron's saying Britain cannot cherry pick. It has to follow by the rules, but there is space to kind of negotiate something between a full freedom of movement and labor and goods agreement and all the way over to WTO trade rules, which essentially all members there's a de facto bunch of trade rules that all members can fall back on if they can't form any kind of agreement, basically, because obviously the European Union and its member states generally are members of the WTO. The criticism of Theresa May with respect to this agreement has been that, she kind of didn't get the best deal in this, and it kind of worries conservative pundits and media sources that coming up in March, she's going to have to start negotiating on free trade rules, free trade agreement for post-Brexit. And if she cannot negotiate something this simple and got the UK a raw deal, then what's to say? So because Theresa May is going to have to start negotiating in March, this coming March, where it's going to be 1 year to officially the exit of Britain from the European Union in March 2019. So 1 year from that date, we're going to start negotiating about freedom of trade, free trade agreements post-Brexit. So a lot of people are saying if she can't get a good deal on this, then help us, God help the UK when it comes to a free trade agreement that she has to negotiate. So I'm not so sure what's going to happen. I think basically until about January 2019, anything can happen. Everyone's bluffing. It's a game of poker, and we're really only going to find out what happens a good year from now, I would say. This is Macron's special deal for the UK, which I don't think is that special, to be honest.